Hello, spooky friends, and welcome to another episode of the Scaryish podcast.
Woo!
Where I'm Robin Grace and this is Adam Diaz.
Hello.
And we're here to chit-chat about some things.
Indeed we are. I'm pretty excited. We're getting into, or at least I'm getting into, the first of my, Christmas topics a little bit.
It's halfway through December.
I know, but I didn't have a ton of Christmas stuff. There's not a lot of Christmas cryptid stuff, and apparently there's a lot of Christmas murder shit that you discover that you're not covering, correct?
Yes, but that's going to be next week. So
okay, so on Christmas Eve we'll release an episode where Robin covers Christmas murder. But yeah, I'm excited. I'm going to be covering the Abominable Snowman. What are you covering this week?
I'm going to cover the Highgate Cemetery. It doesn't really mix with yours, but
not really. Who knows though? We might find connection.
Well, I do have, a Christmas Eve part. I don't know. We'll get there.
It's weird how much stuff winds up overlapping on accident. There's not a lot of times where we don't have overlap. So it's just a lot of times we're like, oh my god, my story has something like that too. But yeah, I'm pretty excited. If you're looking for the Storytime episodes, those release every Friday where we read the homegrown horrors that we have received from our wonderful listeners. Robin, what is a homegrown horror?
Homegrown horrors are the tales of paranormal, supernatural, hilariously coincidental experiences you, your friends, or family have experienced and are more than generous to share with us.
Indeed. So Fridays, those release. You can also watch us record Storytime live Wednesdays, 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. That's 8:30 Central, 9:30 Eastern at youtube.com/Scaryish or twitch.tv/Scaryish podcast. Please join us if you can. It's almost always super duper fun. And when it's not super duper fun, it's super duper duper fun. Just saying. Shout out to everyone who joined us this Saturday.
Oh yeah, for our video game stream. We started playing Silent Hill 2. I think that's going to be a recurring thing. We're going to hopefully beat the game. I don't know.
I will say we were supposed to do it on Friday the 13th. And for whatever reason...
My cousin David, he was waiting on YouTube. He's like...
Really? Oh my god, I feel so bad.
I know. He's like, when are they going to start? It's never... What?
I was so annoyed because, we brought the Xbox in, we hooked everything up, and for whatever reason, it would not work.
Not working.
I tried a million things. Robin came in. She tried some stuff, too. At some point, I was downloading, third-party programs trying to get the shit to work. Reset everything a million times. And then finally, it just worked. And I was like, okay, cool. I'm just going to back away from this slowly and hopefully come back tomorrow afternoon so we can play. But it was really, really fun. It
was super duper fun because there were so many people that were like, oh man, I love this game. This is nostalgia
I was talking
for me.
So much shit about Silent Hill 2, and by the end of it, I'm like, I really want to keep playing.
Yeah,
so.
but it was just so cool because there were so many people that were jumping in. They're like, just press this button to do this or just do this. And
it is a very difficult game to control. So part of it was frustration of not being able to control this character well. But at some point, once you kind of get used to it... Try watching me play Resident
Evil 4, it's bad.
Once you get used to it, you're like, okay, cool, now I just want to get through certain parts of it without being freaked out. So it was a good time. So we'll keep you folks posted on the next stream that we do where we play Silent Hill 2 or whatever scary game we play after that. Yeah, and that'll be a regular thing coming up. And we have...
Hopefully, I don't know.
A couple other things coming down the pipe. We're going to meet with Robin's sister hopefully this week to go over some of those things that I'm kind of excited about. I won't say too much, but if she's listening, she's like, oh my god, I'm the only person who knows what he's talking about. Aside from Robin, who's probably already forgotten.
Why is it that annoying voice?
I do that voice for everyone, so it's not a Liz-specific thing or anything.
Yeah, I know. So. You did that voice for me earlier.
I know. That's an accurate voice, though. Ugh. So, all right, so are you going to be going first, or am I?
I'm going to go first because I want to. All right, so we're going to head over to the haunted Highgate Cemetery in London, England this week. And
my thing has a London connection, too. Oh, my God!
Shut up, is it?
Yeah, it does at the end.
Oh, wow. This cemetery isn't just home to spirits and corpses, obviously, but it's said that a vampire also calls the cemetery rows home. So, I thought that was really interesting. Highgate Cemetery was opened in 1839 and is located in North London, England. And apparently it's a Grade 1 designated feature on the Register of Historic Parks and Gardens in the United Kingdom, which means I was at the website and it was like, Grade 1 means of exceptional interest. Or exceptional. I'm sorry, exceptional.
Exceptional.
No, exceptional interest.
Gotcha.
That's what I meant. Okay, so Grade 1's exceptional interest, and then Grade 2 is special interest.
Oh, that's funny.
I was like, okay, I don't know what the difference of that is, but all right. So some might say that this place is a Victorian Valhalla. I don't say that. I don't know if it actually is, but some people describe it as that. The architecture is absolutely amazing. It's super duper fancy. Nature has taken it over a little bit since it's from 1839, but the structures are still there. So it's a pretty fancy cemetery.
Sounds pretty grade one, if you ask me.
Super grade one.
Exceptional.
So people like Douglas Adams, the author of Hitchhiker's Guide, is buried there, as well as Malcolm McLaren, the OG manager for the Sex Pistols.
Interesting.
I was like, oh, okay. And then Leslie Stephen, the father of Virginia Woolf, which is cool. And Michael Faraday and his wife are also buried there, but they're buried in the dissenters section.
Right on. What's a dissenters section?
People that are not part of the Church of England.
Okay.
So
they're basically buried in the asshole section, according to the church.
And if you guys don't know who Michael Faraday is, you guys should totally look him up because he's one of the most influential scientists in history. He's known for the Faraday cage. I don't know if you folks have ever heard of that, but if you've ever been to what is that place? Spencer's, and you've played with those little electric balls where you put your
fingers on them.
Yeah, and it looks like lightning's like touching your fingertips. You can thank Faraday for that. He worked with a lot of electromagnetism and stuff like that. I don't know if you know that, but yeah.
Nope. I've heard his name before, but I wasn't exactly sure what I heard it in, what context I heard it in.
Okay, yeah, he's a super important scientist. And he's buried in this...
He's buried in the dickhead section because he was a scientist, and the church is like, go over there, brainiac.
All right, so the cemetery is made up of two areas. It's the east and the west, and one is on either side of Swains Lane, which is the road that goes down in between, and it's in Highgate, North London, next to Waterloo Park. And I don't know, UK friends, just let us know if it's like a notable area or if it's hard to get to. It says it's in North London, so I assume it's closer to the city. I'm not sure. But we'll be there one day. I'm sure we'll go to the UK, we'll go to London, we'll check it out. Maybe not this cemetery, but I really want to go see some creepy things. You know what I mean?
I got so excited when you said we'll be there one day, because I know we're going to plan a UK trip here in the near future.
I do want to go to London. I want to check out some spooky places, some cemeteries, stuff like that. And I think that'd be really cool, but maybe not this particular one. Who knows? Maybe one day. Anyway, so this cemetery is home to about 170,000 bodies buried in about 53,000 graves. So either there's like a lot of bunking together going on, or mausoleums maybe. They're all put in one place, or I don't know. Less morbid to think of it that way when it's just a big mausoleum with a bunch of bodies, but 170,000 within 53,000 graves is it's a lot of people.
Yeah, that is a lot of people.
But there are a lot of urns, like ashes and stuff like that, because Douglas Adams, his ashes are there. So it's not necessarily his body. So maybe that's it. That could account for numbers, like people just putting their ashes there instead.
That would make sense, yeah. Similar to like how Japan has graveyards, which is like a family headstone, perhaps.
Right.
If they have anyone that has that tradition in London, I don't know.
So construction took 3 years, and when the cemetery first opened in 1839, it was a lot smaller than it is now. It was in a more forested area, and it was confined to the northwestern section of what it is today. And the plan was to have it be part of a layout of 7 large, modern, privately owned cemeteries that they called the Magnificent Seven. So they built 7 other cemeteries that were supposed to take on this huge load of people that were dying. So with a growing population, the smaller church cemeteries just couldn't handle the amount of burials that were necessary, so just chucking bodies willy-nilly or placing them on top of each other unceremoniously, it just wasn't a good day to die hard.
I hate you.
Christmas!
That one makes no sense.
It's Christmas.
Good Day to Die Hard isn't a Christmas movie, though. Die Hard is for sure a Christmas movie.
Anyway, so it's...
Die Hard and Die Hard 2. No one talks about that in the Die Hard debate. I saw a meme about that. They have Die Hard 2 also set during Christmas time, and they have like the Christmas theme running through it, confirming that both of those movies are Christmas movies, despite what Bruce Willis says.
It's just like Nightmare Before Christmas. You can watch it whenever you want.
Very true. It's an action movie, but you can also watch it at Christmas to make it extra special.
So this whole chunk of bodies, it was just starting to become a bit of a health concern. And during that time, London was in the middle of an industrial revolution. So a lot of people were moving in, the city was booming, and it led to a shortage of grave sites, understandably. And people were beginning to bury their loved ones in shallow graves in their backyards. So
that's really gross.
The smell of decomposing bodies kind of became overwhelming. And at the time, there was this idea of a miasma. So, like, disease would be spread through what they called bad air, and people would be getting sick because everything just smelled like rot and gross, you know? And I think back then, were people just dumping crap in the streets still? I don't know.
Probably,
because it was 1830s, 1840s. It was a long ass time ago.
Anyone out there who's like 170, 180 years old, please email us.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so Parliament ended up passing an act in 1836 that formed the London Cemetery Company, which is responsible for building the Highgate Cemetery. And so the cemetery is 15 acres of surrounding area that were consecrated and used for the Church of England in 1837. And I've heard of consecration before, but I've never actually thought of what it really means.
It's when you're a paladin and you're tanking and you want to make sure that your AoE tanking
what is
to
this,
the
World of
mobs.
Warcraft?
Yeah, don't get on your DPS. The best tank I've ever met was a paladin tank, I'm just saying.
Oh my gosh, okay. Anyway, I always thought it meant witches can't come onto it because that's what Hocus Pocus taught me. You know what I mean?
Consecrated ground,
yeah,
it's funny.
So I looked it up this time because I was like, maybe, and I've covered other cemeteries, right? And I've never actually thought about it, but I actually looked it up this time because I was really curious. And apparently what it is, it's legal and it's religious. And it's not just the Church of England. It's all these different religious entities, these religious entities that do this. And from my understanding, which may not at all be accurate because I don't know anything about it, is that it's kind of like stretching your religious boundaries. Since before, it was something where to be buried in in your parish's churchyard, you had to die in the limits of the parish. So
that's weird. So you have to stay close to home and die nearby, or else you can't be buried in your parish ground or whatever?
Or you'd be buried in whatever the next one is, maybe, or something like that. I don't know. But when there became to be way too many people for that, they had to consecrate more land to allow burial within their religious boundaries. So because they couldn't get buried at their church, they had to make more holy ground for them to get buried in.
So basically, it's like if there was good ground to be buried in, that's consecrated ground.
Yeah.
Because of how crowded the graveyard cemeteries are getting, they were just like, well, we have to consecrate more ground now for the people who stayed within the rules that we're supposed to bury on consecrated ground.
Yeah, and it's not necessary. The cemeteries aren't necessarily by any churches at all. They're just cemeteries.
They're just like...
They're not building more churches.
They're the nice place.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're just like, okay, we're going to go find a plot of land, buy it, consecrate it, and now we can put dead people here.
Yeah, so now it's like, I'm not just blasphemously burying this body anywhere I want. It's actually going to be on holy ground. You're going to go to heaven, whatever. I don't know. Anyway, so...
See, for me... That's really good to know, because I only know consecration from World of Warcraft. And, like, I know the opposite of consecration is desecration, where you take something, you make it unholy. And I know that from Dungeons & Dragons 3.5 edition.
Well, desecration is when you take... say you go to a cemetery, and then you destroy the headstones. You're desecrating
something.
Yeah.
But yeah, my story about 3.5e, what you're trying to get past here...
Oh, my God.
Is my first game that I ever played, and my DM... asked me to play an evil character, and I was put in with a bunch of good characters. I was like, hell yeah, that sounds like fun. And then there was like a character that like kidnapped me. It was a vampire, ironically enough, and my task was to go and desecrate an entire town so he could go live there.
Jeez.
It was pretty fucking sweet.
Okay, anyway, pretty much land is declared sacred or holy, both religiously and lawfully. And does
that happen here? I feel like that's the sort of thing where the people that came over on the boats were like, fuck this stuff, separation of church and state, bro.
Well, so when I say lawfully, I mean if somebody wants to use that land, say you take down the church, you might take down the church, but still it's lawfully consecrated. So you can't just build a parking lot over it.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
So the land itself is both religious and lawful, meaning it's lawfully good.
Oh my God!
I fucking nailed that, and I am so proud of myself. That's 2 references to D&D.
Okay.
Not too many. 2 is not nearly enough.
Okay. Anyway. Are you done?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, you got what I'm saying now?
Yeah, got you.
Okay, cool. So the internet has informed me that the person performing the consecration themselves must be consecrated, which is funny because when I was looking up how to consecrate land, and the first thing that came up was like, how to consecrate yourself.
Right.
So I was like, oh,
it's
okay.
like a normal person can't make holy water. It has to be someone holy to make holy water.
So this person that's consecrating your land, they also have to have fasted for days prior to the activity or the ritual, whatever, and not having had any food that has consisted of blood in it at any point. So no meat or anything like that. And I mean, I don't know.
Or fish.
Yeah. I mean, is fish really different from meat?
It has.
Isn't it fish meat?
I think like on Black Friday or not Black Friday, God damn it.
Black Friday.
During Lent, like I know practicing Catholics that during Lent on Friday when you're not supposed to eat meat, eat fish as well. Like that's why McDonald's has like the double stacker fish sandwich during Lent in particular, is because it's a big thing, especially on Fridays. And I know Greek Orthodox people as well who fast from meat for the entirety of Lent.
But they can still eat fish.
You're right. They can still eat fish.
Okay. Cool. All right. I don't know why that word came out really weird, but okay.
Because you're tired. It's like fucking midnight.
Okay.
Oh my God, it's almost 1.
Oh my gosh. Anyway, so they need to have meditated and pretty much been a person whose life has been dedicated to God. So you pretty much have to be a pretty good person to make sure all this land is consecrated. And then this person marks the entire area with holy oil or water and then prays at each corner of the property. Some say it has to be counterclockwise and then you finish in the center. Some say that you have to start at dawn facing the rising sun. Either way, there's just a lot of rules that go into the process. It might not be these exact things, but it's not just willy-nilly like blah, 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 you're consecrated, done.
Right.
I'm sure it's a lot of effort and a lot of ritual that goes along with it, even if this isn't the exact way to do it. So I just assume that it's a lot of work to get her done.
And I know fasting is a very religious thing. Like, that's another thing that happened during Lent, 40 days, 40 nights, stuff like that. And I hear that fasting aligns you with, like, the divine. So that, like, brings it into you a little bit more.
Closer.
Yeah. So then you can go out and, consecrate things.
I know growing up, being around Buddhist beliefs and things like that, the monks would fast. And I know when I would go to temple on Sundays, they wouldn't feed you meat. It would be tofu or things that they flavored like meat and not necessarily is it.
Right.
Lots of very vegetarian stuff.
I also have Buddhism and monks in my story, so.
Do you really?
Yeah, I do.
Shut up. Really?
We'll get there.
Oh my God. Okay. Anyway, yes, 15 acres for the Church of England. Then there were the 2 acres that got put aside for the dissenters, which were those that don't follow the Church of England or were like Protestant Christians. They were like, we still need place for the bodies, so just put 2 acres to the side.
What do you got over there? You got some ditches? Some empty pools? Yeah, that works. No, we don't need to fill them in. It's fine. They're dissenters. No one cares.
I just think that's rude.
I think so, too.
I think that's super
Considering
rude.
that's where I would end up, I'm like, that's kind of a dick move.
Yeah. Oh man, I don't know. Well, I'll ask that question. There's a question I want to ask. I'll ask it at the end. Anyway, so in 1854, the 20-acre area across Swains Lane was purchased, and that became the East Cemetery. And I guess both cemeteries are used for burials to this day, but are closed to the public. I guess you kind of got to be bougie to get buried there. But I did look it up, though. And highgatecemetery.org, which is the website for the cemetery, states that there are still open burials. They're still open for burials, but just have limited plots. And if you want to buy it in advance, you have to be over 80 or are terminally ill. So you got to be dying or you got to be 80. I don't know.
And I would imagine very, very rich.
So yeah, but there's no prices. So I'm like, oh, do I want to email them?
It's like when you're shopping on Amazon, you find a bunch of stuff, you're like, that's a good price, that's a good price. Then you find an item where it's like, I'll show you the price in the cart. Like, how much do you really want this?
So I'll just ask this question now then. Do you think, since you can supposedly still get buried there, if you aren't with the Church of England, do you think they would let you buy a plot?
No, I don't. I sincerely don't.
Really?
I think you'd have to be someone who fits their criteria, because I bet you there's such demand, especially for the limited amount of space in a cemetery this famous and well known, especially to the people who exist within the church.
Yeah.
I don't think I could go over there and be like, I got fat stacks of cash and I am terminal as fudge. Let's do this. I think they'd be like, we have a trash can that's just your size out back, and we'd be happy to put you in it.
Oh my god.
They collect the garbage on Fridays, make sure everyone comes to visit you before then.
So the first person to be buried there, I'm just going to glaze over you. The first person to be buried there is Elizabeth Jackson, followed by the erection of a mausoleum by Julius Beer for his 8-year-old daughter, which still stands to this day.
That's sad.
During its heyday, getting buried there was like the goal in death. You wanted to get buried there. You know what I mean?
You couldn't wait to die so you could be buried there.
It was so popular that tens of thousands of the richest Londoners were buried there. And the headstones were the most ornate. Everyone just trying to outdo the other. We'll post pictures on our Instagram so you guys can check it out. World War II saw the decline of the cemetery, and it started to fall into a state of disrepair and neglect. People during that time obviously couldn't afford to keep it up. You know what I mean? This is like, oh my god, your stupid laugh.
I'm sorry, I don't know why that tickled my funny bone.
Because I said they couldn't
Tell me
keep it
about
up.
them not being able to keep it up.
God. Anyway, so they just couldn't keep paying for this ridiculously expensive, ornate cemetery. If you see pictures of it now, it's kind of like nature has reclaimed it. The west side, the original side, is definitely more overgrown and covered in greenery and trees and everything like that. By the 1960s, it was all but abandoned. And then came the stories and the urban legends. So once things kind of start getting spooky, the spookier the stories get. So the more overgrown it got, the worse the stories got. You know what I mean?
It's because the people that are buried there paid so much money to be buried there that they're pissed off that it's being left in disrepair.
I mean, I would too, you know? But there's a little note at the end where you'll totally be mind blown. So there were stories of strange men in dark robes that were wandering the area. Stories had them conducting dark rituals, as stories tend to go in these situations. A pair of teenage girls claimed to see members of the dead rising from their graves as they walked down Swains Lane in the night. After their report, others began reporting dark figures lurking behind the gates of the cemetery. Then police started receiving reports of animal carcasses appearing in and around Highgate Cemetery, supposedly drained of blood.
Ah, I see where we're going with this now. V-Wars.
Oh my god. So this leads us into other stories and accounts of red-eyed demons, ghosts, and the main noteworthy entity, a vampire.
Called it.
I mean, it could have been an act of the occult with the animal carcasses.
Right.
But we're going to go with the vampire.
Draining animals of blood to kill them is just so very specific to, like, vampirism. Just because anytime you drain something of blood, it's just so weird. What's it called? Exsanguination?
Exsanguination.
It's just, I don't know. It's just so creepy.
You've read Bunnicula.
I read Bunnicula in, like, 3rd grade, yes.
I love Bunnicula. It's so fucking good. It's so good because it's just like this cat and this dog. I don't know if there was a dog, but this cat definitely is suspicious of this rabbit and just keeps finding, like, vegetables that have been sucked of their juice. It's just such a good book. It's a good children's book. You guys should buy it for your kids. Anyway.
Read it to them and scare the pants off of them.
And then get them a rabbit. Okay.
That's fucking messed up.
Okay, so we've been watching a lot of vampire stuff lately. I just had to do this topic once I read that there was a vampire in it. And we just finished V-Wars, and then we started Vampire Diaries again last night.
She says we because I'm present there. I don't condone these decisions.
You put it on.
I put Vampire Diaries on for you because I was going to sleep.
You were like, Vampire Diaries or V-Wars? Wait, we finished V-Wars. You can watch Vampire Diaries.
I knew it's what you wanted to watch, so I could go to sleep.
Anyway, so this vampire is what's caused most of the panic in the area. So on Christmas Eve, of 1969, a man named David...
What?
Oh, I get it, 69.
Yeah.
You're so funny. So a man named David Farrant encountered what he described as a gray specter of a man walking among the graves. During the mid-60s, stories began to spread of a dark figure who glided among the tombstones with his feet never touching the ground. People began trying to camp out at night, hoping to spot this quote-unquote vampire themselves. Supposed eyewitnesses claimed to have come across a creature, supposedly undead, who had a hypnotic stare and unnerved those who crossed paths with it. And later on, a man named Sean Manchester, who claimed to have seen the entity to back up what Ference saw, believes that it was the king vampire of the undead.
Because you can never just see a regular vampire. It has to be the king vampire. And if you're possessed, it's definitely the devil. It's not just, I don't know, any of the other demons that could possibly exist.
So whether the story of this man is true, it's gained traction since this era of time. And supposedly the king vampire was a nobleman during medieval times, and he practiced black magic and witchcraft and was transported from Wallachia, England, while being stuffed in a coffin. So I could see the vampire lore coming out of that, you know? He got transported via coffin and all this stuff.
Right. I feel like that town is familiar, Wallachia. Keep going.
I think it's from The Witcher.
No.
No?
The Witcher does not take place in the real world.
I don't know.
It does not. I can confirm.
No.
All three.
It's okay. So what is Wallachia? Is it because it's from a video game? I guarantee it.
You know, just thinking about it now, I'm starting to realize that Wallachia is also a place in Romania that's supposed to be related to the vampire legend of Dracula in some way, shape, or form.
Oh, are you talking about Castlevania?
No, I'm not. I'm literally talking about the things I just Googled that have nothing to do with Castlevania.
I feel like they talk about it in Castlevania.
It's because Vladimir the Impaler, Vlad III, Prince of Wallachia, is the person that's supposed to be Dracula.
Ah, I see.
So maybe they talk about it in Castlevania because that game is about Dracula. So
maybe. I don't know.
When I said Google, I meant my brain. That's where that information came from. I definitely didn't just edit out a bunch of dead air where I was Googling a bunch of shit.
Okay, anyway, so legend has it that a group of Satanists thought they'd seek the burial site of this supposed vampire and tried to summon the creature, increasing the sites of said apparition. So, I mean, legends abound. Stories... So many stories.
It does make sense that the more people went to go look for something, the more that people said that they were seeing something.
Exactly. So the cemetery at some point during the 70s was used as a filming location for several horror movies, causing a surge in popularity. And one of these was Tales from the Crypt.
Nice.
I know.
Love that show.
That show creeps me the fuck out.
It's so macabre
the
and
song
so good.
starts and I close my eyes and close my ears and get really scared.
But the Crypt Keeper is just so funny, though. He wasn't meant to be scary. He was just meant to be like...
Are you kidding me? That guy looked like fucking horrible nightmares.
He does look terrifying, but you shouldn't judge a book by its cover. Like, I learned that from The Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Oh, my Lanta. Okay, so... yeah, Tales from the Crypt, pretty cool. Locals flooded the cemetery, hunting this elusive creature. Unsurprisingly, nothing was ever found. I personally don't find it so hard to believe that people would try to hunt down something like that. Because both way back in the day and modern times, we're just always so intrigued by vampires or terrified of them. And as a society, we have just become obsessed with these legends. You know what I mean?
We have a show based on it. So.
I know, yeah, but it's like, there's so many shows about vampires. So many shows about vampires and werewolves, and I just think we're kind of just super into that right now, you know?
I think we've always been super into that, to be honest with you. I think there's always been, like, once we got past the fear that it was real, where people thought it was something that was actually plaguing them in the earlier years.
I was going to say, like, back in the day, people thought that their fellow humans were coming back to life and hunting the living. And
people thought werewolves existed. I think since people have moved past that, now we're more obsessed with the idea of what it would look like in a rational society.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
It would have to be something rooted in reality.
I might do an episode about vampires in the future because I just think that whole thing is fascinating to me.
I already did a vampire, Peter Blagojevich, just putting it out there.
But I just want to do like a whole just generalization. Maybe I'll pick another vampire. Maybe I'll cover Vlad the Impaler in entirety. I don't know.
I hear he was the Prince of Wallachia. Downloaded that from my brain. Just saying.
I fucking hate you. So the unfortunate part of the rise in popularity were reports of grave robbing. So on Friday the 13th of April 1973, a vampire hunt took things just a little bit too far. So these self-proclaimed vampire hunters would break into tombs and then drive stakes into the hearts of corpses, behead them, or steal them entirely.
Why would you steal them?
I don't know.
If you're trying to hunt vampires.
People are weird. Some just kind of relocated them. One report having had a body relocated into the parked, locked car of a nearby neighbor.
So that's just a prank. That's a straight-up prank right there.
That's rude. That's
it's
straight
a dick
up
move.
rude.
It's not a funny prank.
Real talk,
it's kind
that's
of a funny
rude.
prank. I hate you so much. This bitch comes into the bedroom and says real talk, and then just says something she could have said without saying real talk first. It's the first time I've ever heard her use this phrase.
Oh my god.
I hate it so much.
Oh my god, okay.
I was like, real talk? Never say that shit again, bro.
Vampire aside, there were other entities within this cemetery.
I'm realizing the social media is going to have a bunch of people going, real talk, blah, 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 blah.
There's the Devil Ghoul, who eyewitnesses claim they've run into with red eyes. A man was knocked down by an entity who, quote-unquote, seemed to glide out of the cemetery wall while he was walking down Swains Lane, and claims to have been saved by a set of headlights from an approaching car that caused the entity to disappear. Many people claim to have seen the ghostly figure of a crazed-looking elderly woman with long, knotted gray hair who darts quickly between the tombstones. Legend has it that she's searching for the children she murdered during her lifetime.
Wow.
It's pretty intense.
How do these people get buried on consecrated land if they're so clearly evil?
They're not witches. From my knowledge, the only ones that can't get on are witches.
You just figure the church wouldn't allow evil people to be buried on consecrated land, but who knows? Either it's BS, or it's just all about the dollar bills, y'all.
I mean, in Constantine...
I hate you. No, continue that thought. What in Constantine?
In Constantine, her sister couldn't get buried because she took her own life. I don't understand how this woman that murdered her kids could have been buried on there.
I don't understand it either.
Interesting. So there's also a supposed banshee, and then there are reports of people that are assaulted by invisible forces within the cemetery. There's even a spirit described as a hat man. And it seems like this hat man appears in so many of these stories, right? It keeps coming up.
It does. I wonder if there's multiple entities that just wear hats and everyone confuses them as the same entity.
Maybe.
Or there's nothing and people just make stuff up.
I don't know. But it's weird to me that it just keeps coming up, you know? So this hat man apparently walks across the street and then disappears into the wall of the cemetery. Supposedly, bells from a disused chapel toll while he's walking, which I think is
creepy.
Yeah,
super creepy. Did they ring 13 times? Because that would be even creepier.
Then there's a ghostly cyclist, faces that peer out through the barred entrances, and a woman in white. Because what cemetery is without a woman in white? Everyone needs one.
Ghostly cyclist is something I want to know more about. Do you hear Queen playing as he goes by?
Why Queen?
Bicycle? The song Bicycle?
Apparently people would be walking on Swains Lane, and then this bicyclist just comes up from out of nowhere up the steep hill. So
Going up the steep hill? Still working hard while they're dead. I appreciate that.
There are also reports of bells chiming, disembodied voices when no one's around. It's just a whole bunch of different stories. A man in the 1930s even claimed to have come across an imp-like creature while walking through the cemetery on his way home. So this thing vaulted over some railings and then landed in front of him. And it had pointy ears, glowing eyes, and a big nose, and just sent the man running. He was just like, what the fuck? After this sighting, stories of attacks seemed to be common in the months that followed. So after this guy was like, dude, this is what I saw, a whole bunch of people were like, dude, this thing attacked me too. So the stories just seem to never end. It's currently taken care of by an organization. The cemetery itself is currently taken care of, not the imp.
I was going to say, so they caught the thing and it's being taken care of? Like that episode of The Simpsons where that thing is torturing Homer on the plane. Or no, it's torturing Bart on the plane.
Where it's outside the window.
Yeah, which is just like a spoof on the Twilight
Zone. It's currently, the cemetery itself is currently taken care of by an organization called the Friends of Highgate Cemetery. They've made large efforts to restore the cemetery. If you folks want to visit it or tour the cemetery, they do charge an entry fee. Apparently, the guided tour of the West Cemetery is ticketed, guide only, And the East Cemetery is self-guided. So if you want to pay a little bit more money, you can do the guided one because it's way more covered in trees and things like that. It's a little bit more dangerous, but the architecture is way nicer on that side. So that's kind of cool.
It's interesting. It's good to know, too.
But apparently you have to watch out for giant spiders.
God.
Nature has taken over quite a bit of the cemetery, covering many of the headstones there. You guys can check out our Instagram to take a gander at those. Fun little note, as of November 28th, 2019, so not that long ago, a little over 2 weeks ago,
I was going to say,
the Friends of Highgate Cemetery are applying for a bill to Parliament authorizing the trust to extinguish the rights of burial in grave spaces where these rights have not been exercised for 75 years from the last burial, or if there's been no burial in said plot. So they're like, we're gonna get rid of, you know what I mean? So if they haven't used their rights for their plots, whatever, in 75 years, they're going to get rid of them. So if you haven't, you'll have no rights to your shit after 75 years.
So basically, if you have a spot that's reserved, you'll lose that spot after 75 years of non-use.
Uh-huh.
So they're penalizing people who live long, healthy lives.
Yep, I guess so.
Bummer for them.
Well, now, I mean, you can't even order in advance until you're over 80 or you're dying, so.
Right.
They are also requesting to move bodies to make space for more graves and to remove any memorials on top of said bodies.
That's not good. That's dumb.
That is not good. It's not
They're
good.
like, how can we make this place more haunted while simultaneously making more money off of it?
There would also be designated quote-unquote protected graves, which I assume would be the famous people. So if you're a plebe, you're kind of fucked on that front.
That sucks.
So if you guys want to check that out, there you can actually go to the Parliament site or something like that and get a copy of this bill that they're proposing or applying for. I thought it was really interesting and really fucked up.
I will say, if you're a plebe like us, there's plenty of room in the ditch if that's where you want to go. So.
Are you like making a mention of A Million Ways to Die in the West where they're just like, can we get in on this?
I actually wasn't, but yeah, I guess that kind of carries over. So that's hilarious.
I just think it's really strange that they're just like, yeah, we're going to move these bodies, you know?
They're literally trying to make more space so they can keep making money, which is something that seems so greedy. It's like the basic inspiration of like a B-level villain in a crappy movie.
It's just going to be, it's going to be Poltergeist is what it's going to be.
It's like, we would like to stack dead bodies on top of other dead bodies.
Disrespect.
It is. It's super disrespectful, but it's a pretty good topic.
Yeah, thank you.
Solid shit. If anyone lives near there, because I know we have listeners in the UK, I would love to hear about it.
Yeah.
So hit us up. Let us know. Please don't say real talk.
Oh my God.
It's just such a bad phrase.
Oh, okay.
All right. So before I move into my topic, we're going to take a quick break here for some commercials, unless you're listening over on patreon.com. If you sign up for as low as $1, which is our early access tier, you do not have ads on the show as well. Something we'd like to point out.
Yeah,
it's pretty
no
nice.
ads on Patreon.
So check that out if you're interested. Otherwise, just join us for a quick commercial break. And we're back. All right, so I'm going to move into my topic now. This week, I had a topic of brewing that I've been considering doing for a while. And no, it's not the Illuminati that is going to come. This is one that I was like, I have to do this around Christmas. I have to wait. That said, I finally am dusting this thing off. And I saved it for a while, and I really wanted to save it for this time of year. And any of you who have heard me speak earlier in the episode or check episode titles before you listen already know what I'm talking about. I am very excited to get back to one of my favorite things to cover, which is a cryptid. So without further ado, spooky friends, I present to you the Abominable Snowman.
This is going to be interesting.
I'll be honest, when I went into this topic, I did not know how much I was going to be able to find. I was a little bit nervous about it, and as I went on, I thought, okay, there's some good stuff here. This will make for an interesting, fun topic. And then I started to get more and more into it, and I was like, this is going to make for a really good topic. So I hope you enjoy it, because I really did enjoy the research that I did on this and what I was able to get from it. So let me just dive into it. Previously, or as I like to say, last time on Scaryish.
Why do you gotta say it like that?
Because it's how they said it on Dragon Ball Z. I covered the cryptid known as Bigfoot. Some of you may have listened to this. It was one of our most highly requested topics, and eventually I got around to it. It's something I've always been very skeptical on. I don't hang my I Want to Believe poster for Bigfoot. I hang it for Nessie, the Loch Ness Monster, instead. As I mentioned during that episode, there is a difference between Bigfoot and the Abominable Snowman. So a little reminder, Bigfoot is a cryptid that is said to inhabit primarily the Pacific Northwest of the North American continent. Their height is anywhere between 6 to 9 feet. Side note, nice.
Nice.
They're covered in fur that is dark brown, red, or black. Bigfoot,
not white?
Not white. I'm talking about Bigfoot recap right now.
Okay.
Bigfoot is a relatively new name given to this creature that was previously known to the natives of the area as Sasquatch. That word is a derivative of a language of the First Nations called Halkomelem, and that word was Sasquatch, which literally translates to wild man. I want you all to remember that translation and that phrase, wild man. So that's my quick recap of Bigfoot / Sasquatch. Now, the Abominable Snowman has a lot going on with its name as well, but we'll get there. As I mentioned in the previous episode, this creature, the Abominable Snowman, is known to inhabit parts of Asia like India, Nepal, even Russia, and Tibet. It lives in places known for extremely low temperatures and very high altitude. It is a very specific region, a little strip of mountains known as the Himalayas. For those of you unfamiliar, the Himalayas are the tallest mountain range in the world, with its tallest mountain being Mount Everest. And in case you're curious, Mount Everest tops out at 29,029 feet. Or 88,048 meters, for those of you who work with those numbers instead. I don't know, don't ask. 8.848 kilometers. There you go. Side note, before any of you get all, actually, I'll just say it for you. If you're measuring from the ocean floor, you can go ahead and look at a different mountain as being the largest one. I can't remember what it's called. It's like Mauna Kea? Maybe Mauna Kea. Mauna Kea. I don't know how to say that word. But from the base of the ocean to the tippy top of that, it's actually 33,000 feet, which is definitely taller than Mount Everest. It only goes 13,803 feet above sea level. So it's definitely not the tallest mountain as far as like what touched the sky higher. But that mountain technically is taller because it goes to the bottom of the ocean. That said, Everest is the one that touches the sky at the highest, except for a few days out of the year where K2, which is the second tallest mountain in the world, actually gets a little bit higher than Everest due to heavy snowfall, because it gets heavier snowfall at its top than Everest does. This is a bunch of stuff. This is a bunch of stuff that I'm just making sure people don't hit me up on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook like, actually, you're wrong about this. Rah, rah, rah. And no one even mentioned to me Olympus Mons, because Olympus Mons is on Mars. It's a different planet, and the Abominable Snowman can't live there.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
We covered that. I will say,
just getting into it.
Olympus Mons is 3 times bigger than Everest. It's enormous. It's the largest mountain in the solar system. Cool. Fun stuff. Anyways, like with most things covered here on Scaryish, this could all be bullshit. I'll toss that out there.
Wait, the stats or just the...
These mountains clearly don't exist. I'm fairly certain Mount Everest was just made up by people who didn't have CrossFit to talk about before CrossFit started CrossFitting. So the Himalayas are super tall, super cold, snowy as F. There lives a creature who has been dubbed the Abominable Snowman, and like Bigfoot, it got its moniker from someone who just didn't use the name that it already had. The Abominable Snowman is also known as the Yeti. Not the tumblers or the coolers or the microphones, the creature. Shout out to Yeti microphones. It was the first microphone we used for our podcasting.
Mom spaghetti.
Before this podcast. The Yeti is believed to come from the Tibetan language, the word Yeti, which is a combination of 2 words meaning rocky place and bear. So, roughly translated, Yeti really means rocky place bear, which doesn't have much of a ring to it, so folks just went with Yeti. Yetis are said to be between 8.5 and 10 feet tall, which, if you remember what I said just moments ago, is much taller than Sasquatch Bro / Bigfoot, which range from 6 to 9. Again, nice.
So Yeti is Rocky Place Bear. What does that have to do with the wild man?
Just wait. Okay, it'll pay off. Just wait.
Okay.
So Yetis bottom out at around the tallest Bigfoots. 8.5 feet being their low range is around the high range for Bigfoot, which leads me to believe that after the short Yetis were teased too much by their tall, 10-foot friends and family, they said, fudge this place and these stupid assholes, and ran away from home.
Oh my god.
And they made themselves a home in the Pacific Northwest. They're covered in fur, which is said to be brown, reddish, or black, the same as Bigfoot / Sasquatch, so that definitely sounds familiar. They're often depicted as being white due to the region in which they live, and the fact that their fur is covered and matted in snow, and anyone with hair, a beard, eyebrows, or eyelashes that has ever been out in a snowstorm can attest to the fact that snow will stick to it. Even if it's not snowing, sometimes wind swirling around will just throw snow on you, and you walk into a house looking like Santa Claus because all of your hair is white.
Can your eyelids kind of get glued shut?
I mean, if you're closing them, yeah. But usually what happens is you just wind up getting icicles on your eyelashes.
Oh, really?
And you look really, really cool. You also die.
What?
I mean, yeah, you eventually die from exposure if you're out in the cold for too long.
Okay.
Believe it or not. So I'd like to pause for a moment here to just step away from the myth legend to say that as a person who has been caked with snow before, thinking of the creature this way actually makes me feel like it's more real. Instead of it being like an albino that just happens to live around like a white setting, knowing that this is still very similar to something that exists across the planet, but is represented as white because it's covered in snow, definitely makes a lot more sense. And, you know, maybe it's not what we think it is, but there is definitely some idea behind it that a creature could exist that gets matted in snow, is very large, and every time someone sees it, they're just like, nope, not doing that. An interesting fact about the Yeti, so this is not something up for speculation, it's reportedly been sighted for well over 2,000 years in this region. In fact, it's at least closer to 2,500 years, right around there. How do I know that? How do I know it's a fact? Because there was a very famous guy named Alexander the Great. For those of you who don't know who he was born in 356 BC and died in 323 BC. He was 33 when he died. What I know about Alexander the Great is what I believe most people know about him is he supposedly conquered the world. He's supposed to be one of the only people to ever conquer the world. Side note, no, he did not conquer the whole wide world.
Okay.
Just a part of it, the part that to him was the world.
So what area of the world was his world?
Macedonia, all the way to around the Himalayas, and then like north and south, I'm not too sure how far it went. You can just Google Alexander the Great Kingdom if you want to see the map. But it was an extensive piece of land, and it took place in like 323 BC, which is crazy. So here's the thing about this. In 326 BC, 3 years before he died, he showed up in a place called the Indus Valley. The Indus Valley is on the northwest side of India, and you know what also so happens to be on the northwest side of India, right where the Indus Valley is?
Is it that Mount Everest?
The Himalayas.
Okay.
That's where they are. So he showed up this place, and he, very famously, because all this is documented through National Geographic and the History Channel and all these other sources.
Really?
When he showed up here, what he asked of the locals was to see a creature he had heard about in his travels. It's 323 BC. Alexander the Great from Macedonia basically shows up and with this beautiful Macedonian accent says, "Oi! What's all this I've been hearing about a Yeti?"
Oh my god, okay.
I put pause for Robin to say she hates me. And I'm being 100% serious about this, though. He legitimately asked the people of the Indus Valley to present him a Yeti because he wanted to see this creature that he's heard about so much. And they're all just like, we kind of can't do that. They can't live at this low of an altitude, which to me really seems like a cop-out, which is them saying, please don't make us climb that mountain and capture an 8.5 to 10 foot tall snow giant. So, more on the name, because this is where it starts to get really interesting for me. Tibetan has a lot of words that have been used to describe this thing. Like, I know the English language. It's the only language I know. So think of anything that you could describe with multiple words, like money, cash, dollar bills, y'all, dirty money 2020.
Oh my god.
However you want to say it, people will know what you're talking about because you're using a word that makes sense to them. So there's multiple words that can describe the same thing, and it was the same way when it came to the Yeti. So that said, there was a word to describe this called Miche, M-I-C-H-E, which means man-bear, which means it was cousin to the infinitely more famous man-bear pig. So,
oh my God.
Obviously, just kidding. But that is something that it was called. Another word in Tibetan that is used for the creature among the other ones is Migo, M-I-G-O. And that translates literally to wild man.
Interesting.
It's super interesting, which means if a Tibetan somehow made their way to the First Nations in the BCs, in like 325 BC.
It just evolved into wild man. There.
If somehow, like, well, just stick with me here. If they were able to make their way over and they talked about this creature and they had some sort of translator there that was able to speak both languages fluently, but if there was someone that spoke fluent Tibetan and fluent Halkolim and they translated it perfectly, it literally would have been one of the few things that did not get lost in translation and would have translated literally to Sesquak, which would have been a word that they had for something that was already walking around. So that to me is like super creepy, that no matter what, in these two languages on different sides of the planet, the translation is wild man, and it's just a coincidence.
Yeah.
There's a lot of names for this thing aside from that. There's Kang Admi, which means snow man, which makes me feel like that's kind of where we got the idea of snowman from, which is where we start getting into the moniker Abominable Snowman. And I am sure it won't shock you to learn that where this came from is definitely a result of mistranslation.
Yeah.
100%. A guy named Henry Newman went on an expedition to learn more about the region, and he not only translated a Tibetan word incorrectly, he also spelled it wrong and made it a word that didn't exist in the Tibetan language.
What?
When he told people like, oh yeah, I heard of this word, blah, 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 blah.
What was it?
I don't know. I didn't write it down because it's not real.
Okay.
But he translated it to mean filthy.
Oh, no.
Which isn't right. And then he put his own spin on it, changing filthy to abominable. Now, personally, I think filthy snowman sounds better. But Googling that did not really end well. My eyes are forever tainted at the brief 30-minute Googling session of filthy snowman. I didn't know what I was getting into, but I couldn't stop.
Yeah, dance for my ladies.
I did discover a recipe for a dirty snowman, which is essentially a hot chocolate with booze.
Ooh.
So it wasn't all, dirty. But getting back to it, we know Alexander the Great had heard about this thing around 2,400 years ago, and he wasn't the only one. A group of people that have been around for a very long time, known as the Lepcha, and they live in Sikkim, India, actually worship a creature that fits the description of a Yeti. It is known as a, quote, glacier being, and is said to be a god of the hunt. It's said that the creature is very large and ape-like and carries a large stone as weapon that makes a whistling swoosh, is how it's described.
All right.
Whistling swoosh, which to me, I imagine the tractor beam sound effect from Dumb and Dumber when he's describing tractor beam, like...
Yeah.
So that noise. I imagine that's the noise that the stone makes when this thing is walking around. A publication known as the Journal of Asiatic Society of Bengal published an account in 1832 of an expedition which had the purpose of locating and documenting the wildlife of the region. I think in 2019 people think we've just discovered everything there is to discover. In 1832, when things were so very disconnected, some folks were very much excited about going to remote parts of the world to find new species and new wildlife and find things that have never been found before. And honestly, probably to find things that they could name after themselves. I think that'd be super exciting. So in this account, it states that the guides and Sherpas spotted a large creature with long dark hair that walked upright as if human. It fled in fear when it noticed them, and the leader of the expedition declared that it must have been an orangutan. Yeah, he's like, I don't know what else that could have been. It must have been an orangutan. That's probably why it ran away.
That makes no sense.
Exactly.
Orangutans aren't even that big.
No, and it was huge. 1899, a man named Lawrence Waddell published a book called Among the Himalayas. It still exists. You can go buy it on Amazon if you want. In this work, he recounted an event told to him by his guide about a sighting of a large ape-like creature. This creature left behind prints that they took Waddell to examine. He stated when he examined them, they were more akin to that of a bear paw and not an ape. As a quick reminder, the casts of Bigfoot and Sasquatch prints have also been stated to be that of bears, not apes or ape-like creatures by experts.
Okay, so with these footprints, they look like people feet. They have toes.
But they're enormous.
How do they look like bears? Bears have they have toes and stuff, but they have claws too.
You don't really see the claws in the print, but bears' feet are very long, very wide, and they have 5 appendages, and they line up similarly. But isn't it more round? It is more round, but it's more like there is possibility of a bear stepping awkwardly than having a giant human being. So they're like, it's got to be a bear paw because it has the 5 appendages, and the only creature big enough to make a print like that is a bear. So that's why they keep coming back to bear. In 1925, A photographer named N.A., which are his initials,
All right.
stated he saw a creature he originally mistook for a person. This is a quote from him. Unquestionably, the figure in outline was exactly like a human being, walking upright and stopping occasionally to pull at some dwarf rhododendron bushes.
Aw, cute.
It showed up dark against the snow, and as far as I could make out, it wore no clothes. This took place near the Zimu Glacier, which is the largest glacier in the eastern Himalayas. In 1940, a man named Slawomir Rawich, I don't know if I said that right. Probably not.
This is starting to feel like what that one episode where I had to say all those people's Russian names and it just was not coming out right, and now you have to say all these names that are probably not going to come out right.
I think that's my last Russian one at the very least.
Okay.
But this person claimed that during a crossing through the Himalayas, his entire group was stopped because the only passable route had two enormous bipedal animals that stood upright blocking their path. What were they doing? They're shuffling around in the snow. They're just fucking around. Probably having a dance-off. Who knows? Something bizarre. But they waited for them to walk away. And then the group was like, we're going to go now. We don't want to get killed by those things. And they just got the fuck out of there.
Wow.
1948. A Royal Air Force airman by the name of Peter Byrne found a massive footprint of an alleged Yeti. Where did he find it? Sikkim, India. Does that sound familiar? It should sound familiar because this is where the Yeti is worshipped and often cited according to the aforementioned Lepcha people. Oh, and what part of the Himalayas is Sikkim near where these people live? It's near the Zimu Glacier, which is where the guy in the 1940s also saw this thing. So that whole glacier being thing is really coming into focus a little bit.
All right.
So I was really starting to get into like the research of this episode. Like, okay, like there's a lot of accounts in the same regions, and there's been a lot of accounts over a long period of time. And then the 1950s hit, and Yeti sightings kind of exploded. And if you're thinking because you're a really big fan of the show or you're a really big fan of Bigfoot, of course it did, Adam. That's when that Bigfoot hoax happened in the 50s that kicked off all those Bigfoot sightings. You'd be right, but only to a point, because the famous Bigfoot encounters occurred in 1958. The Yeti sightings really took off in the earlier part of the decade, so really here, if you're looking for causation or cause and effect, instead of Bigfoot influencing the Yeti sightings, it's actually backwards. It'd be much more accurate to speculate that these Yeti sightings in the early 50s possibly influenced the Bigfoot encounters or the hoax that would happen in the later part of the decade. So on May 29th, 1953, something very special happened. The first human beings that we know of were able to reach the peak of Mount Everest. So two people made their way 29,029 feet in the air. And a man named Tenzing Norgay, I think I'm saying it right, which is a Nepalese Sherpa, and an explorer named Sir Edmund Percival Hillary, which is
fancy name.
Which is most certainly a name that you are not allowed to say without your pinky extended. Were the two to reach the peak.
I wonder if people still name their kids that stuff.
Edmund?
Yeah, or Percival.
I don't know about Edmund or Percival anymore. So Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay both reported that during their treacherous historical journey to the top of Mount Everest, they saw large footprints in the snow as they ascended the mountain. Tenzing claimed that he believed that they were produced by a creature called the Yeti, and stated that the footprints were appearing to be that of a large ape that he himself had never seen, but he had heard tale of. He stated that his father had seen it on two separate occasions. After this took place, Sir Edmund Hillary agreed that these were footprints of a large ape. He would eventually clarify as time went on that he was skeptical on the topic and skeptical on the existence of the Yeti, because a lot of cryptid enthusiasts would ask him about the creature rather than the fact that he climbed the world's tallest mountain and was the first human being to ever do that.
Wow.
And I bet those are the same people that would say to Sir Edmund Hillary, like, actually, you didn't climb the world's tallest mountain, you climbed the blah, 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 Mars. And it's like, hate it. Anyways, this is where things get pretty interesting. And I know what you're thinking, fucking finally, right? No, seriously though, this is where things kind of take off for me. Okay, March 19th, 1954. The Daily Mail, which is a British tabloid, publishes a story of a snowman expedition that took place in 1954, same year. Its leader was a John Angelo Jackson. He journeyed from Mount Everest to Kangchenjunga, which is the world's third highest mountain, also in the Himalayan region. Upon this journey between mountains, he came across a Tangbochi Gompa. So what do those words mean? Tangbochi is a village, and Tangbochi is a village in Nepal, and a Gompa is essentially a large Buddhist temple. It's almost like a Buddhist university. You don't necessarily have to go there to become a monk, but you can go there to be studied, to study, and to be enlightened. Or be studied if you're really, really weird, I guess.
Okay.
So while there, he found paintings that depicted, you guessed it, the Yeti. Ancient paintings that show that they also believed in the Yeti. Not totally shocking, considering this creature is worshipped as a god by some of the people along the Himalayan mountain range. He continued his journey, spotting tons of footprints, nearly all of which were identified, but there were a handful of very large footprints that no one could identify. This wasn't the only expedition that took place at this time, and this is where things get a little nuts. Another expedition traveled to the Pangbochi Monastery, which is also in Nepal. Upon arriving, they found the Pangbochi Monastery's most bizarre treasures. There is a scalp of an unknown creature that the monks of Pangbochi Monastery keep in their walls. They claim it's that of a Yeti.
DNA test.
One of the members, this is 1950s, one of the members of the expedition obtained hair specimens from that scalp. They were then tested to determine what creature it was, and when the results came back with the science that they had at the time, it was inconclusive to be matched up to any living known animal. The man that conducted the test, which is a Professor Frederick Wood, was only convinced of a few things from the results. One, it was not that of a bear or of an ape, and it much more resembled the makeup of the coarse hair that would be found on a hoofed animal, which is interesting, because he ruled out the two things that are most likely for a Yeti to be. It doesn't end there, though. I said treasures, plural, and this is where this thing really takes off.
Toenails.
No, there was another thing there, and I will now tell you the story of how these two things came to be. This is according to the monks. So, sometime prior to 1954, when this expedition took place, like a long, long time ago, a lone monk left the monastery and found a cave in the surrounding land to meditate in. While there, he saw a Yeti who lived in the cave.
So he fucking scalped him?
Now, there's not a lot of details on what he did when he saw this Yeti. He may have meditated, and the thing may have left him alone. He may have shit his robes and ran home to change because he was so terrified. What did happen, according to the story, is that he did not return to the cave until years later. And when he returned to the cave, the Yeti was there, but it was dead. So the monk did what all of us would do. He peeled the skin off this thing's skull.
How fucked up is that?
He took one of the creature's hands off of its corpse.
What a dickhead.
So he was like, he might be a monk, but he's like, people are gonna fucking believe me. He took its hand. It is known as the Pangbochi hand.
Lucky Yeti foot.
Or monkey's paw. So these two pieces were in the monastery for quite some time, literally centuries, before being discovered by the explorers. They didn't talk about it. The monks never brought it up to anyone. They just had them there as like treasures of something that someone found on their journey towards enlightenment. So I know I often say this could all be bullshit. These two items actually 100% exist. They're not made up by the explorers. If they are made up or hoaxes of any kind, it was by the monks. They're not items that they just randomly found and assembled. They are from something that was living at one point. The explorers, when they found this shit, asked the monks like, "Oi, we really want to take these back to be studied." To which the monks replied, "Nah, dog, we good. This shit stays here. Peace be with you. And also with you."
Oh my
So the explorers were like,
Lanta.
all right, that's cool. And they left. They respected it. They left the shit alone. But they got back, and they told a lot of people about what they found. So these rumors are all circulating at the height of Sasquatch stuff, at the height of Yeti stuff, and then 1959 hits. In 1959, a man named Tom Slick sponsored an expedition to the Himalayas to gather more information specifically on this Pangbochi hand that everyone kept hearing about. So they found the monastery, his explorers found the monastery, and they asked if they could take it. The monks were like, "Nah, dog, we good." A man named Peter Byrne, who is the same fucking dude from 1940, the Royal Air Forceman Peter Byrne, who saw the Yeti in this exact area, was hired to be part of this expedition. He was annoyed at the monks' reluctance to let them take it for study. So he had brought with him human bone fragments. He unwrapped the hand.
Oh, no.
He stole bone fragments from the hand and replaced them with the human bone fragments he took.
Douche nozzle.
He left the rest of the hand there, and he took bone fragments from this hand from the monastery when they left with him. He took them from Nepal to India, smuggled them across the border over the mountain, where he rendezvoused with another man who would be able to smuggle the bones out of India. That man was named James Stewart, the actor James Stewart, better known as fucking Jimmy Stewart. As in, It's a Wonderful Life, Jimmy Stewart.
What?
Super famous actor, Jimmy Stewart. Side note, I knew there would be a Christmas connection with this topic.
Oh my god.
Jimmy Stewart took the bones from Peter Byrne and successfully smuggled them out of India in his wife's lingerie case. Side note, this story was 100% confirmed by Peter Byrne, Tom Slick, the guy who financed it, and Jimmy Stewart, as all having 100% took place. The bones are then taken to a man named William Charles Osmond Hill.
Please tell me they're somewhere in the Smithsonian or something.
He's a primatologist, so he studies primates at London University. That's the London connection. He was a leading authority on primate anatomy during the 20th century. He wrote an 8-volume series on the subject, which is still widely referenced today. He studied the bones in 1960 with the extent of what we knew and what we could study with. His findings were as follows. The creature was a hominid, which means it is a member of the primate family, which includes all types of apes like chimps, gorillas, all that stuff. It also includes the Homo genus, which means humans and Neanderthals as well. He specified that the fragments of this hand most resembled that of a Neanderthal, not a human and not an ape.
It's like someone way down the evolutionary chain who never actually evolved, and so their line just stayed the same.
They never moved into Homo sapien, but they stayed something evolved further past what an ape would be.
Okay, so it's not what it used to be, but along that same line. It's evolved along that same line, just not as much as we have. And they've gone in a different direction.
Correct. They would be intelligent, more intelligent than an ape. It's something that shouldn't exist anymore, but it is completely related to human beings or apes in the same way that we're related to each other. Human beings and apes, I'm pretty sure, are 99% identical with like their genetics and their DNA. Like that 0.9% is where everything gets separated. In 1991, so we're fast forwarding 31 years, it was discovered that another member of Tom Slick's expedition had stolen some Yeti hand samples. The show Unsolved Mysteries, which we refer to as an inspiration for this show, got those samples and had them studied with the extent of the knowledge we had in 1991.
Ooh.
The results were aired, and they were as follows. It is similar to human tissue, but it is not human tissue. We're going to call this near human. In quotations, near human. This next part is also 100% true, and it is fucking baffling. After the show aired, talking about how this was not human but close to human, interest went through the roof in the Yeti, in the hand, and it was so much that another expedition was made into the Pangboche Monastery. By who, you ask? No one knows. All that is known is that they showed up and stole the entire hand.
Assholes!
They stole the Pangboche hand. The monks couldn't do anything about it, and it is said that it was sold on the black market and currently resides in someone's private collection. No one knows where it went. No one knows who has it, but it was straight up stolen from those monks.
Wow!
And when people tried to find where it was, all they knew is it was being sold, and by the time they were able to try and track it down, it was gone. It's out there still. Someone has it. Some really rich person who could probably be buried in your cemetery has that friggin' thing right now, and if they're listening to this, they're probably high-fiving it.
Oh my god, they're high-fiving this hand. Okay.
On December 27th of 2011, so 8 years ago, a Dr. Robert Ogden announced that he had obtained a finger belonging to the Pangboche hand. He got it from London University. It's the same sample that was studied in the 1960s. Because I was like, where the fuck is everyone finding pieces of this hand all over the world? This dude went to London University. Was like, can we use DNA testing finally? Since that's a thing and no one's done it yet. So he DNA tested it because we can do that now. His findings are as follows, as reported by the BBC. Quote, we had to stitch it together. We had several fragments that we put into one big sequence, and then we matched that against the database, and we found human DNA. So it wasn't too surprising, but it was obviously slightly disappointing that we hadn't discovered something brand new. Human was what we were expecting, and human is what we got.
Did they carbon date it?
No, they just DNA tested it.
We have that technology. We should totally fucking do it.
No one's done it. And if they have, I haven't been able to find it.
Carbon date that shit, scientists.
Someone do that. Anyone listening to the show, carbon date it so we know how old it is. All I gotta say is way to shit in our cereal, Dr. Ogden. Perhaps Yetis are just more human than we thought. They're more closely related to us, so we don't see the level of distinction between us because we're not going deep enough.
Right.
Or maybe I just don't want to admit the fact that it's all bullshit. Or perhaps
Okay.
it was really a human hand, which would beg the question...
What did that monk do?
What was that monk up to all those years ago in that cave?
He just scalped some poor bastard and took his
Years
hand.
later, too. It's like he went back to that cave and was like, now I'm going to take this guy's scalp and this dude's hand. So arguably the most famous sighting of the Yeti took place in 1964. An Arctic prospector by the name of Yukon Cornelius.
That is a badass name.
Was simply
That is a
leading
badass name.
a wayward Hermie the Misfit Elf and Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer
Oh
through
my
the
God.
frigid wilderness
Okay, wait. Are you fucking kidding me?
when they came across Yukon's nemesis, Bumble. He, of course, called him this because he was unable to pronounce Abominable. Side note, I bet he could pronounce Filthy Snowman if that was the name. Just saying. Anyways,
Wait, so Yukon Cornelius is a made-up person?
he's the character. He's the prospector from Rudolph the
I
Red-Nosed
fucking
Reindeer.
hate you. God,
Anyways,
he has a badass name.
Yeah, he does. Yukon was thought at one point to be lost, but in a very Gandalf the Grey way, returns later with Bumble in tow, having reconciled their differences. Rudolph saves Christmas when Santa Claus admits that he is woefully unprepared to deal with a simple weather condition known as fog. And the Red-Nosed Reindeer teaches all that fog lights are better than high beams in this situation. The sighting of this abominable snowman resolves when he is enlisted to put the star on top of the Christmas tree at the end of the movie due to his great height, concluding the story that time and again illustrates the point that things that are different or weird are treated like shit by normal, ordinary, basic-ass bitches right up until the weirdo is needed to fix their problems that they, of course, made being normal, ordinary, basic-ass bitches. Hashtag weirdos rule the world.
Bitches?
Hashtag weirdos rule the world.
Oh my God.
So, is the Yeti real? It's possible. And it's possible that most sightings and prints are that of bears. It would make sense. There are Himalayan bears that can get over 7 feet long, so standing on its hind legs, I would think it's a Yeti too, especially if it's caked with snow. It has the same color fur. It would be terrifying, and it would be giant paws, because bears do have giant paws. It could be a lot of things. I'm going to go ahead and say that, yes, this thing is 100% real. It's official.
You're so tough.
I want to believe. I'm putting the poster on my wall. I believe in the Yeti. I straight up do. That hand being in that monastery, I straight up think that that's a Yeti's paw, and it just shows how closely related those things are to us. I'm going to go ahead and call this one confirmed. I guess I'll leave it as plausible if we're doing it in Mythbusters fashion.
I was going to say plausible.
But I believe in this way more than I believe in Bigfoot. So I'm a fan of the Yeti. I'm super happy that I covered the Abominable Snowman. And that, my spooky friends, is the Abominable Snowman.
Well, thanks for that.
You're welcome. Merry Christmas, y'all.
Merry Christmas, y'all. We still have another week.
I know. I can say it early. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas.
Holidays.
Celebrate whatever you want to celebrate, and I wish you season's greetings to it. But yeah, I really enjoyed that topic when I was like, Jimmy Stewart? Like, what the fuck is going on? Who approaches Jimmy Stewart like, can you smuggle some bones for me, dog? He's like, yeah, I got a suitcase.
He's all coked up.
I got a suitcase for my wife's unmentionables. By the way, that's not how Jimmy Stewart sounds. I just thought he was a spy, so I wanted him to sound super cool.
Okay.
So he didn't say oi, so I figured you'd be happy about that.
I want to make a pin that says oi now.
Do you? We
Yeah,
should.
I do.
I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know who would buy them, but we should make
I
one.
know.
So right on. So that's everything that we got for this episode 106. So if you folks have stories, if you've seen a Yeti or an abominable snowman, you'd like to tell us about it, or if you live near the graveyard that the cemetery that Robin talked about, I'm going to start remembering that because cemetery sounds fancy, so clearly it's going to be connected to a church. Mm-hmm. Graveyard sounds like kind of gross. It's like it's a yard that has graves in it. Right?
It just sounds depressing when you said when you say graveyard, it's like grave, sad, depressing, grave. Yard.
I'm thinking of it
It's a yard of depression.
I'm thinking of it very literally as it's a yard of graves, where cemetery sounds a lot nicer and it's consecrated, so it has a C in the name, so maybe that'll help me remember it. Anyways, if you want to tell us about anything, email storytime@scaryish.com. You can also go to facebook.com/scaryish podcast and message us. You can tweet us at scaryish_pod or go over to Instagram and message us at scaryish_podcast. Follow us on Instagram while you're at it, or you can go to our Discord. Go to scaryish.com, scroll down on the right-hand side, you'll see our social media links. One of those is Discord. Click on it, it'll take you right there. Or you can message us by going to scaryish.com and clicking on Contact Us. That form comes directly to us. Robin, for folks who would like to donate to us, how can they do so?
You can go to patreon.com/scaryish podcast. There's a whole bunch of different tiers. Tiers start at $1, and you can get access to episodes ad-free.
And early.
And coffee, ko-fi.com/scaryish podcast. Those are one-time donations. All those donations go to helping us upgrade our studio setup. Also, right now, we are doing pre-orders for our new hard enamel pins that we are getting made. And if you go to our Etsy store, the pre-orders are up there. Right now, you get 10% off, as well as the pre-order discount. So, go on over, check it out. It's cool.
So find the Etsy store, go to scaryish.com, scroll to the bottom, and there is a link to Robin's Kawaii Corner. Click on that, it'll take you straight there. You can also go to facebook.com, and there's a link to it as well if you want to find it that way.
Yeah, or our Instagram, it's all over. I've made sure of it.
Yep, absolutely. But that's everything that we got for episode 106. So Robin, go ahead and sign us out.
Keep on creeping on. We'll talk to you guys later.
Bye-bye.